Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate being here. I'm going to be drilling down into how this exactly works today, because what we keep getting are general outlines of what this concept is, but not actually how to dig in and use it. And so that's what I'm going to be doing today. And this is it's a really cool case study that a friend of mine did, who developed a suite of calculators for analyzing not just real estate deals, it's a whole range of stuff, but the one I'm going to show you is how to analyze a real estate deal to determine, when you plug in all the numbers for a real estate deal, what rate of return are you really getting. So real estate investors are successful for the most part because they have cash, right? You have to have money somehow, somewhere, or access to it to be able to be successful in real estate. So you need cash in order to handle things like rents and vacancies, unexpected and expected capital expenses, maintenance items like roofs and air conditioners, toilets, whatever goes out. And then the most important thing is that you need a reserve fund for down payments on new properties. Because when you find something, you want to be able to move on it, especially in this environment. You can't wait around trying to get everything together. So it's just having that reserve fund really makes this thing powerful. So my thing that I want to talk to you today about is, where do you store that cash? Where do you store that money that you use, that you need for all of these things? And this is the financial product I want to talk about. Is there one that could make your real estate investment even better? So I'm going to pull up this case study and let's get started on this. Before I do the case study though, I actually need to explain to you how interest rates work, okay? Really, what I'm really explaining is how banks make money, because there's very few people that understand this. And this is a key component to understanding how what I'm going to do really makes sense. So let me ask you this. If you could loan money from a bank at 15%, now banks aren't charging 15% now, this is going back into the 80s, but if you could loan money at 15% and the bank would pay you 9%, what is the amount of money that the bank is making on that? You know, so they're paying you 9 and they're charging 15. 6%. Okay. A lot of people think that. There is this magic thing here called a financial calculator, and I've worn 4 of these out in the last 3 years. But the deal with these financial calculators are, they really expose the truth of how money works, and really what is banks' commodity. They're really dealing with money. They're marking money up. That is what they have. And if you look at a financial calculator and you put in, well, I have got it right here. You got 9% starting, you've got a 0 annual payment and a 15% future value. That is actually 66.67% that you're making on that. And the way I like to think of it is, and I brought this as a little prop, I like to think of it as a hammer, okay? If you had a hammer that you could buy for $9 and sell it for $15, right? That's not a 6% that you're making on that hammer. A hardware store would be making 66% on that hammer. So what has happened in today's financial environment is the interest rates have gotten suppressed. They're really, really low. What they're paying you guys to store money in a bank is next to nothing. You throw out a number, let's say 0.25% or something like that, if you're lucky, in a checking account. And let's say that they loan money out at 3.5%, for example. What do you guys think the margin on that is? 1,300%. So as interest rates have gone lower, their profit margins have gotten higher. So now if we go back to the hammer analogy, that would be like having a hammer that you could buy for $0.25 and selling it for $3.50. I mean, if you could sell a bunch of hammers, you would be doing really well. Is this making any sense? So that's the thing, you got to understand the power of learning how money works. Most people don't mess with financial calculators, but this is an actual case study of something that really happened. It wasn't a client of mine, it was a friend of mine's, but it's a very good one that illustrates this. So there was a guy who had been doing this infinite banking process for a while, and he had, I don't know how much cash he had in his cash value, but it was, say, somewhere north of 40 grand. That's all I know for sure. Somewhere north of $40,000 that he had put into this thing. And he called up my friend and said, hey, I can get a loan from a bank, this is a while back, for 6.5%. Of course, you could get one lower than that today. But he said, I can get a loan from a bank for 6.5%, and the insurance company is charging me 8% to loan money for my cash value. Now, to be honest with you guys, in full disclosure, insurance company charges different amounts depending on the company for how much it costs to loan against your cash value. So I am a broker. I work with a lot of different companies, but the primary one I work with is 5%. But in this case, the guy was using a company that was 8%. And he's like, it doesn't make sense because I can get a bank loan at 6.5%, so I don't think this is going to work. So my friend said, okay, let's look at it, let's analyze it and see if we can increase your rate of returns. So, and I'm going to go through that. So it was a $200,000 warehouse that he had a tenant for, and the property value was $200,000. Is that coming up okay? Mm-hmm. Cool. And the price of the property was $200,000, and the closing costs were nothing, and the closing costs were $5,000. Realtor fees were nothing, and so the total purchase price was $205,000. The land value was $35,000. And why do we want to know the value of the land? Does anybody know? It has to do with depreciation. So you can't, land doesn't depreciate, so you can't depreciate land. So that's why we need to know in this calculation what is going on. So the value of the structure was $165,000, and the basis for depreciation was $165,000. Okay. So the loan amount was $160,000. And there was no extra points paid, and the interest rate, like I said, was 6.5%. And the loan term was 240 months. Okay? So that's a 20-year loan. And the property taxes on this particular property were $200 a month. The insurance was $200. Maintenance, since it was a new structure, he had budgeted $50. HOA fees, there weren't any. The gross rental income was $2,600 a month, so that was a really good deal. And it was for 60 months is the way we're analyzing this. And the property appreciation rate, we can fool around with this. They had analyzed it at 4%. We can make that less if you want later, but the years for depreciation, so here's the way it works. On a residential house, it's 27.5 years, and on a commercial property, it's 39 years is how much you can depreciate it over. So we'll put 39 in, and closing costs were 6%. And let's look here. Income tax bracket. He was in a 35% income tax bracket, 15% capital gains bracket, and then he had a depreciation recapture tax of 25% tax bracket. Okay, so do you guys have any idea what depreciation recapture tax is? That's just a tax that they charge. If you are in excess of the actual depreciation, you have to pay it back in a recapture fee. So that's basically what the guy was able to assess. So look at, we got a 24.88% rate of return on this deal. How many of you guys would do that deal just as is? I mean, it's pretty smoking. I mean, that's a great income stream on a really clean property. The guy was really excited about it, and my friend Todd was like, hey, let's look and see if we can make this any better by utilizing this whole infinite banking concept. So the guy said, okay, I'm going to take a loan of $40,000 out of my banking policy, and I'm going to pay 8% on that money. And this is the magic of the whole deal, is that when you have money in one of these specially designed contracts, the repayment terms are completely up to you. In other words, it's called unstructured repayment terms, meaning that once you take a loan, you can determine exactly how and when you want to pay it back. You guys following me? So could he then pay it back at the same schedule as the initial, could he pay it back at the same schedule as the initial payment term? Yes. So he set it in at 240 months, and this calculates how much interest he'd be paying at 8% on that $40,000 for 240 months. And that is what it did to the rate of return. So his rate of return, by combining these two things, went from 24.88% to 105.3%. And it's just, the reason that it works is because you're using more of other people's money. Okay? That's why this works. That's the power of it. So let me ask you guys, the guy ended up doing this deal. He quadrupled his return by making this work like that, but he only would do it if he had access to being able to make this work. So you have to think in advance to get the money in the position for it to be able to be utilized like this. So this is why the deal works. Back to the financial rate calculator. You've got 8% is the present value, and then 24.88 is what we were getting. So that's 211%. You guys following me there? So if you go back to our hammer analogy, this would be like being able to buy a hammer for $8 and sell it for $24.88, right? So what we were doing is we're increasing the leverage in a very safe way to get a 211% rate of return on the $40,000. And what that did was it brought up the 24.88% to 105.03 overall, because we're not doing the whole thing this way. But that's how it's working behind the scenes. Every single thing that I do in structuring these specially designed policies is I do it to get you living benefits, to get you benefits now. In fact, as soon as I humanly possibly can. So you put money in, and then you create an opportunity fund, and you can use it today. It's not that you have to wait until you die to get any benefit. And this is just literally the tip of the iceberg on what the benefit is. But this is what I wanted to drill down and show you a very specific example of how you can actually use this specifically in real estate. I don't think there's a lot of guys talking about how to maximize real estate returns using this specific concept. And it will absolutely blow up any deal as long as the numbers work. Now let's get real for a minute and talk about, if you had structured this deal in a way that you were really tight. Let's say you were in a Nashville market and you were only getting 7% rate of return, right? Does it still make sense to do this? Nope. What do y'all think? Brian knows. Let's put it in. As you got an 8% here, and you're leveraging it against a 7% return. Oops. You're down 12.5%. So you have to have a fairly good original deal set up, Okay, it has to be, in the way that I structure these deals now, it has to be at least better than 5% to make this thing work at all. Because in other words, leverage works both ways. And you gotta be very careful that you don't get on the wrong side of it. Does that make sense? One other cool thing I just want to touch on is one of my visions for helping entrepreneurial people, especially in the music industry. So I was in it for 29 years and I see how the income flows up and down and up and down. And it's just crazy in terms of not non-stable, I guess you'd call it. And one of the things that I know that Seth is doing here that I love is helping you guys figure out alternative ways to supplement that so that if you have a down few months, then you still have an income stream coming over here. And there's another guy that's a friend of Seth's that's doing that as well, Joel, and he's just has an amazing vision for how to do that. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do too. So once you get this thing working and you have an opportunity fund here, if you have a lean 3 or 4 months, you can always take a loan against that to cover expenses. And then when you get that next royalty check in, you can backfill it in. Does that make sense? You can just pay back the loan. And so it gives you guys who are in the entertainment and music industry a lot more stability to your cash flow. Does that make sense?
Opportunity/emergency fund.
Yeah, it's an opportunity/emergency fund. I don't like the word emergency because it kind of has some negative, connotations, but it does work in that way to normalize your income.
You can pay back these loans early then without penalty?
Absolutely. You can pay them back. It's unstructured payback. Yeah. So you can pay them back as long as never and as soon as immediate and over any amount of time frame you want. But you have to be disciplined. If you're going to set this deal up, you've got, so in this deal, how much was the guy paying a month? $334 a month was going back.
Highlighted.
Oh yeah, there it is. $335. So, and now let's just play with the numbers for a second here, guys. Let's just take this property appreciation rate. I think 4% is a little rich. Let's take it down to 2%. And that just brought it down to 102.57. And let's take this loan rate down to what one of my specific policies today would be, which is 5%. So that would bring it up to 112. You see what I'm saying? So this deal was with a company that has a fixed 8% loan rate, and so that would actually be better. Now, if you really want me to blow your mind, I'll take this loan amount and raise it up to $44,000 or let's say $43,000. Let's say you did $43,000 instead of $40, and you can see that you're just using more OPM. And I just raised the rate of return up to 306.75%. So.
And the payment's still lower than it was.
Yeah, because this is at 5%. So if there's is there any fees or anything on here that doesn't make sense to you guys, or that feels like, hey, that's not quite the right amount, or I would like to see it different?
What kind of property is this?
This is, it's an equipment where it's a warehouse. That's all this is. Thank you very much.